Hey everyone. So I had a question from one of my friends who lives a little bit north and west in Texas, out by Lubbock, about how I water all of my orchids because I have quite a few of them. I'm sitting at about 112 orchids right now. I've got 3 on the way, so I'm not quite sure how many I'm sitting at right now. But so what I did was I put it together and I decided to show y'all. So this looks like I'm using distilled water. You can when you have fewer orchids. I learned very quickly that this was a bit of an obsession for me. So I got an RO system and just a little one to put under one of the sinks in my master bathroom. And so I kept, when I first started, I used distilled water. It was way out of control, could not manage it. So I kept the plastic containers and I reused them, fill them up. This is a gallon of water, almost 4 liters if you're looking at the metric system. And yeah, so that's what I use to gauge my water prep. In the summer, I water about twice every week and a half because it is getting very, very hot here in San Antonio. So just, it's painful. Some of my orchids got a little dehydrated. So there are 2 things I use. Let me set up my funnel first. And each one takes a tablespoon to a gallon or 4 liters. The first is the Repot Me MSU fertilizer. I use the liquid. I just prefer the liquid fertilizer. So I'm going to go on ahead and put that in. Have to make sure to shake it up really good to make sure that all the micro and macronutrients are blended into the liquid. And then you just pour it in. It's 1 tablespoon per gallon or 4 liters. I'll have to clean that up. I usually do this over the sink. Okay, it's this nice little light greenish color. It's very pretty, mild. And keep in mind that this is not a fertilizer. I know a lot of people on the internet are calling it a fertilizer. It's not. This is orchid food. The difference is the quantity of nutrients that are being provided. This is much lower than a typical fertilizer. You've got 3.7, 3.5 as your macronutrients. A typical orchid fertilizer might be 979. It's much higher. The Repot Me fertilizer, which is I have in the granules, the slow release, is actually 11 to 12. This is really good for the winter time. But I use this all year, and you can use this as directed every single week because of the low levels of macronutrients. I use it 3 weeks on, 1 week off, just to kind of give the plants a break. You don't want to over feed because the plants don't like it. So I use it 3 times a month, sorry. The other thing I use is also from Repot Me. It is a probiotic for orchids. It's called Quantum Orchid. I've seen mixed reviews online, but once I started using the Quantum Orchid, I noticed my entire collection just started to flourish. Plants that were struggling to grow leaves grew leaves. Plants that were struggling to grow roots grew roots. So I use this at the same amount, 3 times on, 1 time off, and I rotate that throughout the year. I use it less in the winter time, so 2 times on, 2 times off, but same thing. It is 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. So same thing, it's much darker because you are putting beneficial bacteria. You're basically creating a microbiome or micro ecosystem within the plant's pot, right? This is the stuff that is beneficial and helpful to the orchid. These are not the bacteria you want to kill off. If you happened to use an insecticide like Physan 20 because you had an infestation of thrips or mealybugs, I would consider this absolutely essential because an insecticide, fungicide, virucide is going to kill off everything, right? And so the plant is basically on its own. I'm just knocking off the last of the quantum orchid, and then I take the lid and I shake it up really well. This ends up becoming my feed. So this is the other reason I like to do it in a gallon container, because then you know that you can stir it up. It's really well mixed. You can also, stir, but I just prefer it. And then I have a little orchid pot that I use. It controls the amount of water that you're putting in because of the narrow spout. And I pour for 1 to 2 seconds, depending on how dehydrated the orchid looks. If the orchid's showing really, really bad symptoms of dehydration, I will soak it in its pot. And I won't worry at that point about feeding it. What I do instead, put this off to the side, is I take the pot, I put it in the sink with the RO system, and I turn on the RO until the water fills the pot. I leave it there for anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes so that the medium can soak in the water, because if the leaves and the pseudobulbs are wrinkly, that plant needs more water than I gave it. That week I was busy, or the heat, like this last week, got way worse than anticipated. We are on a heat advisory right now. And so I missed the ball, and that plant needs some extra help. So I'm gonna pause right now, go grab one of my orchids, and show you how I water it. Hi again. So this is my Iwanagara Apple Blossom. It is a yellow variant. I got it through the Alamo Orchid Society here in San Antonio. It was a bare root orchid for $10. Fantastic opportunity on auction day. It is already showing signs of new growth right here. And all of this rooting has been since I potted it in this orchid pot. I do like with my cattleyas to use orchid pots that have holes in them. I also use these for my vandas because indoors I have no place to put my vandas bare rooted. I could put them in the backyard, but like today, they'd be hurting, and you have to water them constantly in this kind of heat. So this is literally what I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that was long enough to go all the way around the plant and water the top. Now, because this one has holes in it, I can actually feel around the edges to see if the moisture got into the sphagnum moss I put at the bottom. I'm not feeling it yet, so I'm gonna put a little bit more over here. Yeah, and a little bit here, just to make sure. The nice thing about using sphagnum moss is that as long as it's touching all the way around the plant when you potted it, it will spread the liquid all the way around the plant. It acts like a wick, like a self-watering pot. And so that's the advantage, but I want to make sure, because there's so much aeration in this pot, that I feel moisture all the way around, and I do. So after I added a little bit on this side, it's good. So this one's ready to go back, and I'm ready for my next plant. So for my dendrobium here, this is the Erdang Light Blue, which I'm really excited about because this one's going to do a lot this year. She's done a lot of growing. This one's in a Repot Me Slotted pot. I love these for dendrobiums and Oncidium intergenerics. I've just got a solid pot in here, no hole. What I do for these is pretty much the same thing, but I'm not as careful about feeling on the bottom because the tub of the solid pot is going to retain the moisture that falls through. And the plant, because I've got sphagnum moss at the base, it's going to wick it back up during the week when the plant dries out. So literally this is what I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I pause. Notice it's dripping out the bottom. I hope you can see that. There we go. Then I come over to the side where the new growth is, because this is where the new roots are going to be. In fact, the roots are over here a little bit because they grew this way, but normally they'll come out this way. And so with most plants, I'll just make sure to give it a good wicking right there, because I know that's where the new roots are. So I want the moisture to be right there for them. No more than that. If I have more than about that much water in the bottom of the pot, I'm going to dump it. The plant, they really don't need a lot of water. And this one almost, there's a little reservoir at the bottom. This pot actually sits up about half a centimeter from the base, the way it's made, which I prefer, because then it doesn't sit in water the whole time. If you do that, you're going to get root rot. So that's pretty much it. If it gets, again, dried out before it's ready, I just come in with my little orchid pot and I squirt on the top. Other options are to run it under a faucet. Here in San Antonio, we have limestone in the water. It is as hard as it can be. So using tap water is not a good idea for orchids. It will hurt them. It puts too much salt on the media, and it will damage the roots. So I really can't use that option where I live. My environment doesn't allow for it. The other option is pot soaking. So if this plant had shown signs of extreme dehydration, I would have simply put this under the RO's faucet, let it run, filled it up to the top of the medium. You know it gets there because the plant starts to float a little bit, and then leave it for 5, 10, 15, even 30 minutes so that it soaks in. Once it's done, dump the water, because if this plant has an infection I don't know about, if I share that water with another plant, I just gave that plant the infection. Dump the water, and she's watered for the week. In that situation, I do not worry about feeding her. It's about getting the plant rehydrated, then we can worry about food. It's the same with people. You can go 40 days without eating and not die. You can go maximum 3 days without water and you're gonna die. So it's about hydrating first. Food comes later. So I hope this was helpful. If you do something different, or if you found something useful in the way that you take care of your orchids that I or my followers would find beneficial, please include it in the comments. I know I say this all the time, but I haven't even been doing this a year. This is all coming from feedback from Orchiata, from Bumblebee, from Danny at Miss Orchid Girl, from the Alamo Orchid Society, from the American Orchid Society. It's coming from the people, from the Orchid Hut in Houston, from Dana, and from Nicole up in New York. I am getting my advice from the orchid community based on what they do with their orchids. And then I adapt it based on my environment. And so if I'm skipping something that you're doing that you're like, wow, this really helps, let me know, because I'm growing and I'm learning. And I think we all are. That's part of the joy of this hobby. And so, let me know in the comments, please. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and happy growing.